Thank you, Christian. I'd like you to notice the cross on the way out, because Ken was here at 9 o'clock last night putting the flowers up on the cross, as he does every year. This year was harder because there was no blossoms. Most of the frost had got the blossoms. And then Billy Kay, I think Billy was here earlier. But it looks beautiful. Ooh, this old guitar. On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And I love that old cross, where the dearest and best for a world of lost sinners was slain. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. Oh, that old rugged cross, so despised by the world, has a wondrous attraction for me. For the dear Lamb of God left his glory above to bear it to dark Calvary. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. In that old rugged cross, stained with blood so divine, a wondrous beauty I see. For 'twas on that old cross Jesus suffered and died to pardon and sanctify me. For I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. To the old rugged cross I will ever be true, its shame and reproach gladly bear. Then he'll call me someday to my home far away, where his glory forever I'll share. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. Yes, I'll cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown.
This is the gospel lesson for this Easter Sunday from Mark and the 16th chapter. Listen for the word of the Lord. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb?" When they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. And as they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed, for you are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised. He is not here. Look, there is the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee, and there you will see him just as he told you." So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
The mic's not working. I'm amazed that each year when I get my songwriters royalties, when the playlists, that one song I wrote in the dirtiest nightclub in the world in Pasadena, Texas, gets played not hundreds of times, but thousands of times right across the world, maybe once or twice on a radio station. And it's quite amazing. It's a dream. It's called Calvary. I dreamed I climbed old Calvary. I stood under that old rugged cross. I saw the face of Jesus. His earthly life was lost. His body bruised and broken, with a spear hanging down from his side. I don't know how long I stood there, or just how long I cried. Calvary, I was there when they crucified my Lord. Calvary, I was bathed in the blood of my sweet Lord. I was there when they crucified my Lord. I touched the heart of Jesus when I dreamed I was there long ago. No one saw me watching. No one seemed to know. I saw a mother weeping for the son they had taken away. How could she understand? He'd rise again someday. Calvary, Calvary, I was there when they crucified my Lord. Calvary, Calvary, I was bathed in the blood of my sweet Lord. I was there when they crucified my Lord. Amen.
First of all, I want to say the lilies up here this morning are just beautiful. And we're so grateful to Gloria for coordinating this and for everybody who contributed a lily in honor or in memory of a loved one this year. You never know about lilies. It's always risky promising them on a certain day, and especially because the date of Easter changes every year. This year it's April the 1st, but there are times when it's as late as April the 15th or the middle of March. And Easter lilies tend to open up when they want to, not when we want them to. And as a result, in the past, I have actually celebrated Easter with a chancel full of unopened lilies. Just doesn't look right. There's something wrong with it. It takes you a little while to figure out what's missing. Their lilies okay, you can see that. It's just not exactly what you expected. I remember, I think it was Irma Bombeck who wrote, "Never go to a doctor whose waiting room plants have died." And it's something like that. Unopened lilies, they sort of send an ambiguous message. We're not quite sure of this yet. I remember several years ago reading an article in a newspaper, and I clipped it and saved it. I think it was from Galveston, Texas, and I've shared it with you before, but it was about a woman and her parakeet. His name was Chippy, and she was cleaning Chippy's bird cage one day with a vacuum cleaner canister, and the kind with that metal tube that you put attachments on, and she was cleaning the bottom of the cage with no attachments on the tube when the phone rang, and she turned her head to pick up the phone and continued vacuuming, and as soon as she said hello, she heard the horrifying sound of Chippy being sucked up into the vacuum cleaner. And she immediately put down the phone and ripped open the vacuum bag, and he was still in there, alive, a little stunned, but still alive. And so he was covered with dirt and soot, and she grabbed him and ran into the bathroom and turned on the faucet and held that bird under the water to clean him off. And when she finished that, she saw the hairdryer on the bathroom sink, and she turned that on and held Chippy in front of the blast of hot air to dry him off. And that's the kind of story apparently the newspapers once in a while like to print. So they sent a reporter out to interview this lady. And the reporter concluded the interview by asking her, "How is Chippy doing now?" And she said, "Well, Chippy doesn't sing much anymore. He just sort of sits and stares." And I thought, how many people go through life like that? I guess we've all experienced times like that. At some point, life is going to treat us rough. It's going to knock us around a bit. and we're not going to feel much like singing. You can pick out these people. They have the unmistakable expression of survivor on their faces. They sort of look like those Colwitz lithographs of refugees and war victims, the vacant stare. It happens to all of us at one form or another, sometime or another, in some degree or another, because life is that way. It's going to treat us rough someday. The point is, there are some people who never get over it. They go through the rest of their life with that expression on their face, like an announcement: life is not fair. Life has treated me badly. I played by the rules. It did not do any good. I still got roughed up. And some of them have made a mission out of their entire lives protesting life's unfairness. What I want to say to you this morning briefly is that the Easter message is directed especially at those people. It's for everybody, but it's told in such a way that it is addressed especially to those who are weary and heavy laden with disappointment. When the women came to the tomb that day, that's how they were. They were heavy laden with disappointment. They had seen a good man defeated. They believed in him. They had linked their own destiny to him, and they were in despair that morning because of what had happened to them. We're not going to really understand Easter unless we understand that. Because that trip to Jerusalem was supposed to be Jesus' crowning triumph. And the disciples too. That's what they thought. They had all worked for this, all those years of sacrifice. For 3 years, they had given their best to the best this world has ever known. Now, what could be more deserving, not only of popular success, but of God's favor than the mission of Jesus? If this world is the way Jesus taught it is, created and guided by a loving God who cares about the things that Jesus stood for, then God ought to prosper him, support him. But we know that's not what happened. The world killed him. It abandoned him. The world said, "Crucify him." And God said nothing, not a word. We point out in Lent that all the disciples forsook him and fled. In fact, we pointed that out last Sunday. That's there during Lent because we identify with it. But so is this here. There are people who can identify with this. For all intents and purposes, God himself forsook him. At least that's the way it looked. He cried out on the cross in Matthew and Mark, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" That's there, friends, in case you've ever been there. In case you've ever known that crushing disappointment in your life. He couldn't beat the odds. They finally got to him. None of it worked out the way we thought it would. Do you know that feeling? Well, the story of Easter is told so that those of us who know that feeling will know this story is for us. And it's told in such a way to make another point too. When Jesus died, he died. It was over. Only when you understand that will you know what resurrection means. I don't think we really want resurrection. I think what we really want is what we once had given back to us. We want the one we lost to come home again. We want the life we once had restored to us. We want this not to be an end, but just a break. Like waking up from a bad dream. Or like they used to say, some of we old timers will remember after World War II, for the duration. That's a wonderful word, the duration. What we want to hear is what we've put up with in this life is only for the duration. The assumption is that it has a definite span and it's going to be over one day, the duration of the war. That's what they meant. And when the war is over, then our life will return the way it once was. That's not what resurrection is. That's resuscitation. That's not resurrection. You can resuscitate that which is really alive but only looks like it's dead. But what's really dead, it's gone. It won't come back. It will never be the same again. And that's exactly what the Gospels want us to know about Jesus on Good Friday. They don't want there to be any question. He was dead, as we say in the Creed, crucified, dead, and buried. He's gone. Now, if you get that, you're ready to learn what resurrection means. Because resurrection means a whole new creation. Listen to me. At the resurrection, the disciples didn't go around shouting, Jesus is back. They went around shouting, Jesus is Lord. And there's a big difference. It wasn't like having the old gang back together again. In fact, if you read the gospel accounts, when they saw Jesus, many of them at first did not even recognize who he was. He was different. To some, he appeared as a stranger. To others, he appeared as a spirit. Others didn't even see him at all, like Paul, but they just heard a voice. The resurrection was not a reunion. It was something that never happened before. The resurrection doesn't restore the old. It creates the new. Jesus is forever different after the resurrection. It's often pointed out, and I believe this, that the best proof of the resurrection is not the empty tomb. That can be disputed. But the incredible transformation in the life of the disciples, which is a matter of historical record. Think about it. They are ordinary men after the resurrection, but they are now leading extraordinary lives, every one of them. Something happened to them. Something changed them. Something came over them. Tennessee Williams, the playwright, died a few years ago, and he had lived most of his life as a lonely, frightened, despairing man, and you could see that in his plays. They were plays about despair, people getting trapped, hopelessly trapped, who couldn't get out of their situation, like Laura in The Glass Menagerie, which I think is really his best play. It was his first play. But I have heard one of the critics said after Tennessee Williams died that in his later work, he was writing on the theme of hope. And he put it in a wonderful phrase. This is what he said about Tennessee Williams. He was writing, before he died, about the power of violets to crack rocks. I love that. Something like that could be said of the disciples' life too. You could draw a line right down the middle of their lives, before the resurrection and after the resurrection. Before the resurrection, they were roughed up. They despaired about this life. They were sure that this abuse of Jesus was evidence that God was not in control of things. But after the resurrection, no matter what happened to them, and worse things happened to them. Tradition says that every one of the disciples except for John was persecuted and martyred for the sake of the gospel without ever recanting their faith. Easter showed them that not only is there a life-giving power that can cause a little bitty flower to crack open a rock, but that same power can crack open a tomb. And that's what changed them, that power. And so they went to the four corners of the world complaining, not that the old world has been restored, not that the good old days are back, but that a whole new world is here, a whole new way of living. Before Easter, they had hoped this was all just a bad dream. After Easter, they had to pinch themselves to make sure they weren't dreaming. It was beyond their wildest dreams. God had not resuscitated an old world. He had created a completely new world. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come. The kingdom is here. The Messiah is here. And not only that, but they turned to the language of creation to express this amazing understanding. The book of Revelation says that one day there will be a new heaven and a new earth. And they were sure of that now. They took it literally. At the end time, there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. But in a sense, they could also say that it had already begun with the life and resurrection of Jesus. That's why we began the worship service this morning with the beautiful hymn, "Morning Has Broken," like the first morning. That's exactly what the New Testament says happened at Easter. It was like the first morning, the day of creation. God has done it again. The most amazing thing, given us another chance. And not only that, but a whole new world. And that means you can let go of your old life. You can walk away from the prison that you may have been living in. It means you're no longer bound by the past. The chains are loosed. We may mourn the loss of our old lives, our old loves, but we know now, if we believe in Easter, there's a new life on the other side. Several years ago, I served a church in Memphis called Galloway United Methodist Church. The last year I was there, they decided they were going to invest in new robes for the church choir. The old ones were pretty tired looking, ragged, worn out. Our choir got new robes several years ago. I remember the first Sunday they wore them. Well, down at Galloway, they decided, I convinced them actually, that Easter would be the best time to wear these new robes. And so they did. And they were beautiful. Later on that season after Easter, I went to visit a woman who was a member of the choir. She had been diagnosed with cancer. She really lived only a few weeks after Easter. But when I visited her in the hospital, she told me that she wanted to be buried in her new choir robe. I love that. That is just the kind of lightheartedness that characterizes people of deep faith. They know that when they're no longer in charge, God is still in charge. And she said this, she said, I heard a preacher once say that in heaven all God's children have robes. And I want to take mine just in case. Well, after she died, her daughter was going through her belongings. And among her belongings, she found a little poem that her mother had written right before she went into the hospital for the last time. I asked her if I could have a copy. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but at the end of it was this line. She had written, Lord, send me a surprise that catches me off guard and makes me wonder, just like Easter. Well, at Easter, God sent this world a surprise, and it caught us off guard, and it makes us wonder. I mean, we really didn't expect something like this. We expected the same old stuff. The most that you could hope for in a world like this is a miracle or two now and then. But what he sent was a whole new world, a whole new way of looking at the world, a whole new life, a whole new hope, like the first morning, like in the beginning. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy